But I would like to invite Stefan Berggren, Head of Unit for the Environmental and Sustainability at Sweden's Medical Products Agency and co-chair of the MDCG Task Force on the Environment, to give an in-depth evaluation of EU environmental regulations and due diligence. And then afterwards, Stefan, you've put yourself in the firing line a bit, as you will be the only person on my panel for questions. But just before you begin, we've got what's on screen now can be used to send in questions. So this is of particular interest to those people online, because obviously people here can ask questions directly. But if anybody doesn't feel or wants to submit questions anonymously, I'm presuming, or just doesn't want to stand up and ask them, then this is an alternative. Stefan, would you like to present? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for that kind introduction.
Do we have the slides, please?
So this is basically me then. I'm director at the Swedish Knowledge Center for Pharmaceuticals in the Environment, but also responsible for environmental issues at the Medical Products Agency. And then I'm also co-chair of the just established European Task Force on Medical Devices and the Environment, working together with the Commission there and with Denmark as co-chairs. And then I'm also co-lead of the I'm also chair of the European Working Group on Pharmaceuticals in the Environment, which has been running for like four years maybe, and it's been, I think, fairly good work that we have done there, and I'm hoping that we can do the very same when it comes to medical devices and environmental issues. So I will start with an overview of environmental aspects, and then I will go into a bit on the task force work, and then also a bit on the legislative aspects. I also touch upon some of the work that's been done in Sweden on this issue. I will start with the European environmental policy, and actually this is the 8th environmental action program that's just entered into force, just in 2nd of May 2022. And that is EU's legally agreed common agenda for the environmental policies until 2030. So this is not something new. It's been up and running since the 1970s, and this is the 8th program then. So what I'm saying with this is that it's a long-term work, and it's a long-term vision to 2050 have a society living well and within the planetary boundaries. And I'm trying to remind you that this is actually what we're working for. We're not working for this very small part. We're trying to work on a larger scale when it comes to environmental and climate issues. And this long-term vision builds on the European Green Deal. And also the Environmental Action Programme is taking its base on the United Nations Agenda and Sustainable Development Goals. So I will briefly go through them in case you're not familiar with this. You probably are, but one time when I had a lecture, people hadn't seen this. So I think it's important. If you work with this every day, then you take it for granted that everybody knows about this, but it might not be so. And if you know it, it's good to have a reminder, I think. So these are the Sustainable Development Goals that the United Nations and all the countries within the United Nations have signed on to try to reach up to 2030. It's not very far ahead, 2030, so it will be a challenge. And some of these are especially affecting, of course, medical devices and pharmaceuticals and the health industry in general. But I just also wanted to show you this picture. This is another way of cutting the cake. This picture is called the wedding cake. And what you see on this is that you have the society in the middle, and then you have the economy at the top, but you have the biosphere at the bottom, showing that without water of good quality and sufficient amount, without the marine, without the seas and the oceans, and without the biodiversity and without the good climate, we won't be able to reach a good society and good economy. So this is, I think, sort of builds on the necessity, the way I see it, for us to have a society also taking care of the biosphere in a good way. So I will then touch a bit on the European environmental policy, the Green Deal, and the Circular Economy Action Plan. And the purpose of this is to make goods in the EU market more environmental friendly, recyclable, and energy efficient through their whole life cycle. So that was that part. Maybe I should have some, concluding picture after that. So I'll just then. Do you have any comments on the first part? It's all crystal clear to you all. Do you agree on this wedding cake picture? Yeah, people are nodding. Yeah. Okay, so I will then dive into the task force on medical devices and the environment. And this picture is from our Danish colleagues. So I have stolen that from them. When it comes to actually the wheel is showing that medical devices have a large impact on especially climate, but also on other environmentally related issues when it comes to the health sector. So it's a sector with considerable impact, and this is also the task force an opportunity to focus on possibilities to strengthen these green obligations within the directives, but also a step to simplify environmental considerations for the sector. As you will see later on, it's a bit complicated, as you know, when it comes to the environmental aspects. And this is actually from you, I think, this picture. No? It's from Denmark as well. Okay. So this is also what we are aiming for. We are aiming for a sector to aim the work at the sector due to the fact that it is a considerable impact on the environment. We have the opportunity to focus on this side here, an opportunity to focus on possibilities to strengthen the green obligations within the directives, and also to simplify environmental considerations for the sector, because it is complicated. And that is also, we want to align and harmonize the regulation with complex horizontal legislation at the EU level, a bit like Katrin, I think her name was presented before. I think she also had this in mind, and also to undertake a proactive approach to new environmental legislation. And I also want to be crystal clear on the fact that we need medical devices, we need pharmaceuticals, we all know that. But we have to deal with it in a way that also take care of the environmental impact. So this is the challenge. And what we will do then in the task force, we will monitor and share knowledge among member states, especially when it comes to mapping and monitoring. So what we are trying to do now is to map all the legislations that affects medical devices when it comes to the environmental area. And then there are other aspects, of course, and other legislations that also affects the medical devices. I don't know if I need to go through this, but the thing is that we want to propose solution to tackle identified potential issues in the interplay between relevant horizontal legislation on environmental matters. So also try to, gather this and then propose some kind of solutions, or maybe some kind of easier handling for companies trying to get a grip on all those issues. But also, we want to be able to share the opportunities as well by going green, if I put it simply. And how do we work then? We make use of the directives to contribute to the environmental sustainability, encourage incentives for more innovative and environmentally friendly solutions, but also when it comes to knowledge sharing on relevant topics. And two examples could be experience with reprocessing and opportunities and challenges with electronic instructions for use. We'll see. We just started. We had our first meeting only a couple of weeks ago. So this is what we are aiming for. And we'll see where we land. We have to start somewhere, and this is where we choose to start. The members are Denmark and Sweden, as I said, but also Germany, Spain, France, Finland, Netherlands, Portugal, the Commission, and Turkey at present. And it's open for other member states as well to participate. So it's just to send me, Katrine, or Gabrielle a message. So we will include you in the work. Okay, so EU's environmental and due diligence legislation impact the medical devices and medical technology. I just raised some examples here. And packaging and packaging waste directive is... are there any questions on the task force? Maybe before? Or comments? Maybe? Are we on the right direction? Yeah, please.
Hello, and thank you for your presentation so far. I think it's very interesting and very necessary as well to look at coherence between the medical devices regulation, the IVD regulation, and also the environmental legislation which is out there. So very helpful. I should introduce myself. I am Petra Zoner with MedTech Europe, the EU trade association for manufacturers making medical devices, diagnostics, and digital health. I think I've seen everything that you've been presenting, very interesting. I wonder if you already have an idea of where the task force wants to go, or how regularly you will meet. Will you engage with stakeholders? Do you foresee something, or is this too initial at the moment to give any answer?
Yeah, well, I can give you some answers at least. We want to involve the stakeholders. We consider that important. And at what stage and how, we haven't decided yet, because we don't know really. But we would, of course, like to have a discussion with you at MedTech Europe and with other stakeholders as well. And when it comes to the work, we will be starting with monitoring what regulations are the most important and affecting most medical devices. So that's where we will start our work now. You want to add anything, Gabrielle? Yeah. Any other comments? Okay. So we will continue with this then. Some of the environmental legislation that I picked up. There are many others as well, as you will see. But the Packing and Packaging Waste Directive is one that involves medical devices. And of course, it aims to reduce environmental impact of packaging waste. And medical device manufacturers must ensure that their packaging is minimal, recyclable, and made from sustainable materials. Only this directive is quite complex. So it's and then we have the eco-design requirements. Manufacturers must design products with minimal environmental impact through their life cycles. And then we have the restriction of hazardous substances that restricts the use of specific hazardous materials found in electronical and electric products, including medical devices. And the REACH regulation, I almost forgot that I put it in this morning, which is very important, of course, one of the most important ones, I would say. Deals with registration, evaluation, authorization, and restrictions of chemicals. And medical devices that contains chemical substances may need to be registered under REACH, and documentation and compliance. Manufacturers must provide documentation about the chemical substances used in their device, and that's also that the substance comply with REACH. There's also a demand on supply chain communication that requires manufacturers to communicate information about the safe use of substances down the supply chain. So you have to keep track on the supply chain as well. Then we have the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive and also the Environmental Due Diligence Directive. And I will dive a bit more into those two because they are fairly new and maybe not that familiar. So the Environmental Due Diligence Directive, it focuses primarily on environmental impact, ensures that companies access and mitigate environmental risks and impact associated with their operations and projects, includes pollution, resource depletion, climate and biodiversity loss. So it should say focus primarily on environmental and climate impact, I would say. And inter alia, among other things, companies must evaluate how their operations and business models align with climate goals as the Paris Agreement. And the application is often applied during merging and acquisitions, project financing, and other business transactions to identify potential environmental liabilities. And when it comes to the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, it has a broader scope covering both human rights and environmental impact. It requires companies to identify, prevent, mitigate, and account for adverse human rights and environmental impact in their own operations, their subsidiaries, and their value chains as well. So it applies to larger companies operating within the European Union and including non-EU companies with significant activities within the European Union. It also takes into consideration then the climate change mitigations that we need to do.
Stefan?
Yes.
Can I ask you,
Yeah.
how much longer have you got? I can see that our audience are transfixed and very much enjoying your slides.
Yeah.
I also have some nice questions.
Okay, so I will go briefly.
We've got 10 minutes left.
Yeah, okay.
So.
I will, thank you for letting me know. So this is the summary of that, and I think maybe if you get the slides later, you can read that. And this is some other regulations that concerns medical devices. that we have identified in the cooperation between Sweden and Denmark, and that we will work together with the Commission and the task force on those issues as well. So this is just to give you an idea of all the environmental legislation that might impact medical devices, because we don't really know that it's the case for all these regulations. Probably not, but we need to be sure and have an understanding of that. And this is just to give you a brief overview of how some of those regulations are divided between different agencies in Sweden. So we have the Energy Authority Agency up there on your left. We have the Chemical Agency, we have the Medical Products Agency, where I work. We have the Environmental Protection Agency, and we have the Agency of Geological Survey, dealing with different kind of regulations. So this makes it even more complicated for organizations and companies too. There's a lot of different stakeholders also when it comes to the agencies and to the organization of within the countries. So that was the last slide.
Good timing. Thank you very much. That was fascinating. I think there were 17 possible regulations that companies should bear in mind.
Yeah, but that was just, I don't know if it's all and if all are really relevant, but
yes.
There's a lot. Maybe that's the main
it shows the
take-home
scale
message
of the work.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So, thank you, Stefan, and a few questions if you'd like to sit down.
Yeah.
So, how does a startup know which agencies they have to contact in the case of multiple legislations applying, and how are different member states approaching this? And finally, will there be a central EU office or some harmonised way forward, do you think?
Oh, well, I feel a bit lonely here.
Yes.
But
so, firstly, how does a startup know which agencies they have to contact?
I think that's complicated. Yeah. What I know what we do in Sweden, we do send out a newsletter. We have 3,000 3,000 people, taking that we send it to. So that's quite a few. And
so SMEs?
Yeah, I think
1,000 SMEs. Yeah.
No, not only.
Okay.
It's those who are those who want to have that newsletter to their mailbox. They get it. But there are SMEs, of course. I guess quite a lot. So that could be one way. However, when it comes to the medical products agency in Sweden, we don't have all the information when it comes to those environmental legislations. So it's a bit complicated, but we have started to work on it. And well, I understand the complexity, but I don't have an answer for that.
Okay. And how are other member states approaching this? Are you aware of any initiatives going on to support industry in the case of multiple legislations applying?
Well, one is the task force that I just mentioned, and I think that's hopefully a good example on how we can work and how we can proceed that work as well, and develop it in a way that's for the help of people.
Yes, yeah. So that's a starting point. But given the discussions that are ongoing about potential changes to the EU MDR and IVDR, do you think it may be possible that there'd be more centralisation and maybe even some kind of centralised office for overseeing where there are overlaps between environmental legislation and medical devices? Blue skies thinking here, but
no, I don't know really, but It could be of use, of course, but it could also be, something that makes it even more complicated. So, I don't know really.
Okay, right. Hedge your bets
When I
on
heard
that
the
one.
AI regulation being taken up earlier, I thought maybe that could be a good idea to
Yes.
put everything to an AI system and then ask your question if it's relevant, and then
Yes.
see if you get if it's applied or not.
Can I ask, how is a balance found between device quality and safety and fulfilling the environmental requirements?
Well, I think we need to have, it's the same discussion, I think, that we have when it comes to pharmaceuticals. You have to have the safety and you have to have the efficacy, first at hand.
Yes.
But you still need to take into consideration the environmental aspects, because as I showed you in the beginning with this wedding cake, if we only work at the top, then we won't be able to have a prosperous society within like 100 years. So we need to have that in mind as well, I think, when discussing those issues.
Yes. Do you think there's a need for more dialogue between environmental experts and medtech regulatory experts?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And in what framework should
maybe
that take
dialogue. I think there's a need for mutual understanding of the different issues. That's important, and you can achieve that with the dialogue. Yeah.
Yes. In what framework do you think that dialogue should take place?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe a question for the audience.
Anybody have any idea? Because really, you need people to better understand each other. You need the people who are promoting all these environmental initiatives and regulations to better understand the medical device and IVD regulations. And equally, you need those people who are within the medtech sector to better understand the goals and how you achieve them in the environmental sector. So presumably there is a need for more working groups and more dialogue. And I'm not sure that there is a great deal of that at the moment. Is anybody aware of anything that's going on? Petra, thank you. Could we hand the microphone to Petra, please?
Hi, great question, Amanda. Also, I think a rather painful question, because there's always more that one can do, right? And I think, however, dialogue is very important. We have, in the environmental side, also the digital side, the legal liability side, we have a lot of legislation coming down the pipeline, even more than has been presented today. And I think manufacturers are struggling to keep up with all of the requirements. And if you have a progressive policy, such as in the environmental side of things, where you have, you establish a benchmark, then you move it progressively, right? Which is part of the idea of getting towards the 2030 goals and also the 2050 goals, then I think there is a need for dialogue to ensure that we have the right level of, on the product legislation side, the right level of safety and performance, but also make sure that we keep our eye on the correct way to achieve those goals, also taking into account our Earth. So I think having that dialogue is important. From MedTech Europe's perspective, we would like to see, and that's no secret, we have, our vision has been published last year, we would like to see a single governance structure for the two regulations, for the medical devices regulation and the IVD regulation. And I think part of the role of that governance structure should also be to ensure or coordinate to ensure legislative coherence between all of the different EU legislation. I think it's what's happening right now, I think, and this discussion shows how important that is.
Right. So that's something for the near future, you would say?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you, Petra.
There's a question.
Yeah, lovely, thank you.
I wanted to add on this topic of an interesting experience on these forgotten regulations for medical devices often. That is being directives, most of the cases, it means that a lot of the implementation is being taken place on each country. So each country may have different requirements, different way of implementing things. And bring the experience from Portugal, we had the situation as consultants where we have a company that they ask, what the hell is this? Because this is being imposed for public procurement, that when something is being procured, they need the entity, the public entity doing so, the hospitals in this case, they need to check compliance with these regulations, with these kind of rules. And it's interesting because this is not part of the CE marking, and this is again an example of something that's a manufacturer. In this case, it was a software company. They don't see how this applies to them many of the times. How this is a fit is a good example of what you're saying, that this needs to be better articulated. It's just another example of regulatory lasagna discussion that we are having, is in a good example where this being enforced not into manufacturers, but being enforced on the procurers that needs to validate the compliance when they procure a tool with these legislations, and the manufacturers are not ready many of the times to provide the declarations of conformity or whatsoever that is required for these regulations.
Yeah, thank you very much for that additional contribution there. I feel this is a discussion that could go on for the rest of the day. It's a really fascinating and extremely large topic. But it's time to break for lunch, you'll be pleased to hear. And our next session, we'll be hearing the keynote talk from the European Commission. So everybody needs to be back in the room and ready by 1:15, please. So it just remains for me to thank Stefan for your very valuable contribution and slides. Thank you.
Thank you.